Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this Around the Ropes YouTube exclusive. Now, guys, you may not know who this gentleman is, but you definitely have heard him. He's one of the louder people when it comes to wrestling. He is one half of the commentary team for Invictus. He's 1/3 of the commentary team for Titan. He also owns We Are Wrestling, the one, the only, the incomparable one himself, Pete Rosado. Pete, what's going on?
Nothing much, John, and it's good to be on here Around the Ropes podcast tonight. I am loud for a reason. There's a reason why I am known as the voice of a generation, 10 years in this incredible business of professional wrestling, doing commentary for so many places. For those who've been around for a long time, I used to do commentary over at Five Borough Wrestling out in Brooklyn, New York. First 4 years of Recombination Wrestling. You see what are your partners? Before you came along, John, I was there sitting at that commentary table, pulling some great stuff. Now they have a great team over there with Cheyenne and the team at AJ, and I always forget my big man's name. I always forget his name all the freaking time.
I don't remember his name, but I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, he was a co-host of Shot of Wrestling.
Yep.
But, they have a great team there now. I stepped away from there after the first 4 years of doing shows for BCW and, now doing We Are Wrestling. And like you said, at Titan, at Invictus, at Wrestling Is Now. There's a couple places I'll be making some debuts at in the New York, New Jersey area in the next couple of months, actually. And in fact, up in Connecticut also, 1/3 of the commentary team over that Blood, Sweat, and Tears. I don't know how my voice survives all of this sometimes. Especially listen, when I tell you, I think was the second week of September. I don't know how my voice is going to survive that. We got the 3 shows in 3 days. But I make it through, and a lot of it is due to the fantastic commentary partners that I have, and probably the most notable of those commentary partners, the one, the only Alphonse Stevens. I also get a chance to work with Alex Aceta, the owner of Invictus over at Titan. But me and Alphonse, we just make an incomparable team. We're together at Titan. We're together at We Are Wrestling. We're together at Invictus. And honestly, as much as I would love to work with anybody, there's just something special there. With me and Alphonse, and I'm lucky to be able to work with him on so many occasions. But I got a question for you, Joe. I know you're going to be doing an interview with me.
Yeah.
You've got a lot of questions for me, but I've got one question for you.
What's up?
So in that beautiful intro package that you have, it lists John B as host and creator, right? And then it lists my good friend, the man-child himself, Ryan Peterson, as a host, right?
Yes.
And I don't know about you, and I know this prescription is kind of strong, okay? But I don't know, maybe I'm not seeing something here. Where in the hell is Ryan Peterson?
Unfortunately, I did ask him to come on here earlier. Unfortunately, he was too tired.
Oh, he's too tired to conduct a podcast interview on his own podcast. I, who have been running around the Bronx, New York, putting up hundreds of posters in every neighborhood of the Bronx, while on top of that, being working full time, as a teacher, as everybody knows, I work in the school system. Getting ready for the start of the school year, putting up posters, doing interviews, having to live a life, walk my dog. You saw my dog a little earlier. I've got all that. I'm bone tired. I don't know what day today is, okay? I think it's 8:30. It's probably 9:30. You said 8 o'clock. I said 8:30. It's 24 hours later than what it was supposed to be. I don't freaking know anymore. But I'm here. But Ryan Peterson, the man-child, is too, listen. I hope he gets his glass of warm milk. And he gets tucked in nice, and he has his little warm little towel around his neck, okay? And the next time he asks if I've got time for one more match, I'm going to be like, no, I've got time for no more matches.
I'm laughing. He's not even here and he gets roasted.
Listen, I'm going to send a letter to Tommy Dreamer and everybody over at Impact. I don't want to see Ryan Peterson doing any work with Impact anymore. Nothing. I am on. It is officially 2023. The rest of 2023 from here on in, it is the I am going to roast Ryan Peterson every day for the rest of the year.
It's funny because we've had other people on who know him, and every interview we've done where he's been on, somehow it always turns into the person roasting him. So it's kind of funny, but no, I'm glad we finally got you on.
Listen, I'm happy as well. I know me and you've been trying to figure something out. I know we were supposed to do something for the last show back in March for the title tournament. Unfortunately, I know you were going through some health problems at that time and dealing with some things and stuff like that. And I'm glad that you're better. And by the way, I know I spoke to you in person, but I want to say it live on tape so it doesn't get lost in the annals of history. I am so very proud of you for everything you've been doing with your health and what you've been achieving. You know, it's so great to see you moving forward in such a positive light, and I hope you keep going in that direction, my brother.
Thank you. I do appreciate that. Yeah, it's been an interesting 2023 to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, you started the year wearing Andre the Giant's pants, and now you're over here, almost ready to fit into ravishing Rick Rude's pants.
Hey, you never know.
There you go, right?
You never know. And no, I laugh though when people look at me. They're like, you don't look like you lost a lot. I'm like, really? And I'll be straightforward right now. I'm down 52 pounds already.
Listen, 52 pounds is a lot more than you think it is. You know, when you really think about it. But you've been doing a lot. You know, and you've been really pushing yourself and can continuing to go in that right direction and doing it the right way too, which is really awesome. You know, dedication and pushing yourself and doing the things that you've been doing, and it's always so great to see when you make those strides, and just like we make strides. You want to we find, especially with the tragedies that we've had to deal with in our world the last 2 weeks, and things like that. You want to remember to give people their flowers while they're still around. So John B, you deserve some flowers live here on the air. You're always giving everybody else their flowers, but if no one else, I'm going to give you your flowers on your show here tonight.
I do appreciate that a lot. I do appreciate that. But yes, you are a busy man, to say the least.
To say the least. Busy is being generous.
Well, especially before we went live, you were telling me what your September is going to be like, and how you make it to October is being. Yes, granted, I have the job situation right now, but every weekend, well, except for this past weekend, I'm always on the road. And with me, the thing is, a lot of these shows that I go to are not, I don't have the luxury of going to a show 15 minutes away from my house. I'll just put it this way, 90% of the shows I go to, it's at a minimum of at least an hour to an hour and a half. That's at a minimum. So believe me, I totally get the being on the road a lot. Trust me.
Yeah, man. It's been tough. I mean, August is always a tough month for me. August, the first week of August 4th is that first week is always very tough for me. The anniversary of my mother's passing, and then the very next week, the anniversary of my grandmother's passing. Two very influential figures in my life. So the first 2 weeks of August are always very rough for me. And then when you get into that, mid-second week going into the third week, as I said, I work full time as a teacher, so, unfortunately my school, and as much as I love my school, the one thing I hate about it is they usually have us as teachers report back very early. So I was back in the building as of Wednesday, August the 16th.
Oh, wow.
Mind you, students are not coming back until Tuesday. This upcoming Tuesday is the first day of school for my kids. DOE, they go in, Department of Ed goes in on Thursday. But my kids are in on Tuesday. So, I've been in the building since August 15th. And since then as well, every time I leave work, I'm driving back home. I'm putting up, posters, all around the Bronx, making sure that we are, promoting as much as possible for our upcoming We Are Wrestling show. as well as trying to maintain any bookings that I have as well with commentary and things like that. And then, like you said, September is going to be, I'm grateful that I have so many things, happening in September. But when you think about the enormity of it, right? The first month of the school year, first month of the school year, wrestling bookings. I think I have every Friday, with the exception of one, where I'm doing a show in some capacity. I think there's only 2 Saturdays this upcoming September where I'm not working a show. There's 2 Sundays where it's like, hey, trying to catch up with family and trying to do what I can to try and rest up and get ready for the rest of the week. But
hold on, I think we
again, I am blessed.
Hold on. Come on, Pete.
No, did Ryan finally decide to show up?
Come on. Guys, I do apologize for this technical difficulty right now. But, damn it.
Well, Ryan's putting a hex.
1 second here. All right. Sorry about that. Pete, you still there?
No, I'm still here. I'm just trying to figure out why Ryan Peterson is trying to hex the show.
Sorry about that, guys. But you were talking about, before we had that little technical issue there, you were talking about, the fact that you returning to school and the month of September with, you have all the commentary stuff.
It's a blessing. Don't get me wrong.
But
it's an absolute blessing to be able to do the things that I'm doing and
totally
have the opportunities in the places that I have the opportunities to. But when you step back and you think about it, just like, I'm going to be like, I am literally going to be running on caffeine and prayers for the month of September.
But you'll get through it. I have faith in you.
I will. I
have faith in you, but
I will use some black magic to suck the life force out of Ryan Peterson to try and make it through the month of September.
But I want to first get into We Are Wrestling, because it's the anniversary show coming up on September 8th in the Boogie Down Bronx.
That's right.
And there's a few matches I want to look at. And the first match I want to look at is actually, I think personally, it's going to be a bloodbath. And that's the tag team match of Sent to Slaughter versus the team of O'Shea Edwards and Johnny Davis.
John Davis.
Now, I'd seen the promo that John Davis, I apologize. But I had seen the promo that Danny Moff and Sean Donovan cut a couple days ago.
We had to put a warning label after that one.
When I saw it, I'm like, oh. So my question to you is this: is the Bronx going to be able to stand after those two teams basically probably kill each other?
Oh, man. So there's a little backstory to this, right? There's a little backstory to this. You can actually go on our YouTube right now, the We Are Wrestling YouTube, and you can see the match. We uploaded the match of Dan Moff versus O'Shea Edwards from our second show, It Was All a Dream, in Ridgefield Park, New Jersey. It's the main event of that show, and my God, what a main event it was. Dan Moff came out with the victory that night, but both men were beaten and bruised by the end of it. And mind you, O'Shea Edwards the very next day competed in the final Ring of Honor final battle of that generation of Ring of Honor. The very next night in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and Baltimore, Maryland, I should say. So 2 years ago, a little about 2 years ago, that show was in December of 2021.
Okay.
Little under 2 years ago, O'Shea Edwards and Dan Moff went to war in We Are Wrestling. But there's a little bit of a backstory to that I've spoken about on a couple of occasions, but not really have gotten into depth about. The match that night was not originally supposed to be Dan Moff versus O'Shea Edwards. That was not the match that we had planned for that night. In fact, a couple of weeks prior, the original person who was supposed to be in that match reached out to me. I'm trying to see if I could find it here because I know it's somewhere in this phone here. Here it is. So originally for It Was All a Dream in December of 2021, the original match that was scheduled was actually supposed to be Dan Moff one-on-one, and here it is for everyone to see. Dan Moff versus John Davis. That was the original match that was planned for that show. It would have been a first-time ever match, as John Davis and Dan Moff had never, ever been in the ring together. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, John Davis suffered a little bit of a knee injury and was told by doctors that he needed to take X amount of time off. And, John Davis has gotten to the point of his career where he's one of those wrestlers that actually listens to doctors, right? And so he said, okay. And he did take the time off, and that included having to pull out of that match on that show. And it was John Davis who reached out to me and said, hey, why don't you reach out to O'Shea Edwards? I think he may be available for that match on that day. I think it'd be a great replacement for me. And of course, I reached out to O'Shea Edwards, and the rest is history. And again, you can see that match on our YouTube, O'Shea Edwards versus Dan Moff from December of 2021. It was all a dream. So now here we are 2 years later. And I was thinking about for the anniversary show, there's a rule in wrestling. There's a kind of like in baseball, John, they have those unspoken rules, unwritten rules of baseball. It's kind of like an unwritten rule in professional wrestling. And they say if you capture lightning in a bottle, if you capture magic unintentionally, unbeknownst to you, don't try to recreate it. Just let it exist, right? Let it be. There are a few times where you get lucky, right? The WWE's had that in the situations where Shawn Michaels versus The Undertaker Part 1 and Shawn Michaels versus The Undertaker Part 2, both of those matches were absolutely incredible. But for the most part, you have those situations when you try to recapture the magic and it doesn't hit the same the second time around. And when I was thinking about this anniversary show, my brain kept going back to, I want to do Dan Moff versus O'Shea Edwards again, but I don't want to do it the same way. I want to make it better. How do we top that? Because if I feel like if we just do it again, it's just not going to be as great as it was. And that's no disrespect to O'Shea or Dan Moff. It's just the idea of once you've seen it, it's hard to top. And that's when I had the idea of making it a tag match. And so almost 2 years to the day of the original match that was supposed to be John Davis versus Dan Moff that turned into O'Shea Edwards versus Dan Moff, we're going to get John Davis and O'Shea Edwards versus Dan Moff and Sean Donovan. And to your question, the long road to your question, I think we'll have to, reinforce the ring a little bit, and we might have to tell the fans to back up a little bit, and it might get a little violent, but I think the Bronx will be able to handle it. Listen, you got to remember, the Bronx went through being burned down to the cinder and blossoming again into a great borough. If we could survive that, we could survive anything, even Moff and Donovan and O'Shea and John Davis. I don't think we'll survive unscathed. There will definitely be some remnants of that will never leave the Bronx. But it's going to be one hell of a match. I tell you that much. I don't know who survives that match.
Well, I mean, like I said, when I saw the promo posted, I was like, oh, this is going to be a good match. And the other, like I said, there's a few matches I want to look at. And the other match that I want to look at is actually your women's match. And that's the Ruthless Lala taking on AEW's own Mercedes Martinez. First of all, how did you end up pulling off Mercedes Martinez? And my second part of that is, how do you feel as a promoter that you get these two women who have been in this industry for 20 plus years, never crossed paths at all, and they're finally going to cross paths September 8th?
I have an immense amount of respect for Ruthless Lala and the things that she's had to deal with to get to this point in her career. I also have an immense amount of respect for Mercedes Martinez. People who know me know that Mercedes Martinez and I have a very incredible friendship. And I look to her for mentorship and for guidance. We met years ago at a Shine show here in New York, when Shine and Evolve used to do double headers. Shine would run on Friday night, and then Evolve would run on Saturday, or sometimes Shine would run Saturday afternoon, and then Evolve would run Saturday night. Mm-hmm. And at the time, I was, still finding my way in the business. I had been around for a while. I was doing commentary, but I had some friends who were working for Evolve and were able to get me in the door to help out doing meet and greets and putting up chairs and, just doing this, paying your dues, right? Yeah. And I ended up connecting with Mercedes, and I initially wanted to get her information. I was always a big fan of Mercedes Martinez. And in the process, we struck up a great friendship. We're both big fans of Batman, and that's kind of where it started. Both incredible Batman fans, and we struck up a great friendship. And I've been able to work with her a couple of times. I worked with her many years ago at Pre-Combination Wrestling, bringing her in to have an incredible match, which you can see on their YouTube, I believe, of Mercedes Martinez versus Darius Carter. That was an absolutely incredible match that I was delighted to be able to be on commentary for. And you always think like, okay, these are those once in a lifetime moments. And little did I know that, that relationship would continue to blossom. Our friendship would continue to blossom, both professionally and personally. We've had just a great relationship. And I was able to bring her back actually the same night that we spoke about, December of 2021, for It Was All a Dream. I was able to bring her into We Are Wrestling, and we did Mercedes Martinez versus Masha Slamovich, and it was an incredible match as well there. And obviously, Mercedes has done great things for herself at AEW, and you can see her almost every week right now on AEW's Collision. If you watch the pre-show of the 0 hour pre-show for All Out, you saw her in trios action. As well. So she's continuing on. You wouldn't realize, unless you knew, you wouldn't realize 20 years in the business. I mean, she still moves and wrestles just as well as, some of these girls are doing, 5 years in the business. And she is absolutely killing it. And I am absolutely blessed to be able to continue to work with Mercedes Martinez and continue to have a somewhat of a working relationship with AEW talent. We've been able to, over the history of We Are Wrestling, be able to work with such talented individuals such as Billy Starks, Jay Lethal, Mercedes Martinez, Sky Blue. We've been able to have a good number of people that are in AEW or have been a part of AEW on our shows, and we would love to continue to be able to do that. And Mercedes Martinez versus Ruthless Lala. For me, I wanted to bring Mercedes back in for a very, very long time. And there was a couple of things that just, made that a little bit hard to do. I would have loved to bring Mercedes back sooner. There are a variety of matches that I could sit here and just go over that I would think would be incredible to present on a We Are Wrestling stage with Mercedes Martinez in them. This one was a little special because I've sat down with Lala and we've spoken many times, and she's always told me, what are some dream matches that she's had in her mind. And there's one thing a lot of wrestlers, don't always get the chance to do is have some of their dream matches, usually because the dream matches that they'd want to have are against people that are either signed to a company that they can't really, work the independents, or you have to wait till you get there, and or people who were before you, right? Like there's a lot of guys who say, man, my dream match, I wish I could work with Eddie Guerrero. Oh, man, I wish I could work against Ric Flair. I wish I could work against CZ. And, for the most part, like those are, when you think about like that would have been impossible. You started wrestling 10 years ago. Flair's been retired for, 6 times the length of that, right? But so for me, this was a special one where we had an opportunity to put a dream match on the table for a professional wrestler and say, hey, here you go. Like, we can make this happen. And it's going to be an absolute dream. I know a lot of people were kind of clowning us for a little while because they were like, we know Pete loves women's wrestling. And, you look at all of our shows, we are very big on making sure that we, spotlight our female talent, whether it be in female on female action or whether it be, intergender action. We are very big on highlighting the non-male portion of our roster. And a lot of people were like, we're seeing all these matches announced for this anniversary show, and there's no women's match. What's going on here? And we saved that one for the very end. We announced that match absolutely last, and that was by design. And it's going to be an absolute dream. For me, it's always a lot of fun to be able to call a Mercedes Martinez match. But to see Ruthless Lala in the ring against a woman that she's admired, that she's looked up to, and two women who, their careers kind of mirror each other, right? 20 years in the business, plus over 20 years in the business for both of them. Both of them fighting through adversity in different ways in their careers. Mercedes Martinez having to carve her own path for a very, very long time on the independents. Finally got that big break. Things didn't go as she hoped they did, and finally getting another break, and things finally getting the traction that they always should have, right? These kinds of things for Mercedes should have happened 10 years ago, right? That's how great she's been. Ruthless Lala coming up out of Texas, for a long time, having to train in situations that weren't exactly the greatest, having to make a name for herself, in the state of Texas, and then having to find a way to get out of Texas. If you don't think that's hard, ask Brian Keith. Brian Keith, who did not have a booking in the Northeast, one of the biggest places for independent wrestling. Brian Keith did not have a booking in the Northeast until December of 2021. Where was that? We Are Wrestling. Not to pat myself on the back for it, but like the fact that nobody, had the bright idea to say, let's bring Brian Keith to the Northeast for the very first freaking time when this guy is killing it for years in the Texas scene. And Lala had to deal with that as well. If you think it's hard for some of the male talent, like there's a lot of male talent, great male talent in Texas that are just locked in Texas, or they don't come out to some of the bigger areas, and they're freaking fantastic. And you could be saying the same for female talent. People like Promise Braxton, people like Ruthless Lala, people like Hyon, who was finally getting some exposures overseas with Impact, with some other places. But there are so many great talent, and I know I'm missing a bunch that just don't get the exposure that they should. And this doesn't just go for Texas. It goes for a lot of places, especially even in the Northeast. You get a lot of people who are wrestling in the Northeast, male, female, and otherwise gendered, wrestling in the Northeast territories that sometimes it's very hard for them to get out of the Northeast. And that's one thing I pride myself on trying to do. And
no, I commend you a lot and we see it now. I know the big discussion now is that women's wrestling, is not getting booked properly. There's been a lot of discussion that a lot of these shows have one women's match just to get that one women's match in.
Yeah.
And you have talented, I'm not putting down any company, but you see it a lot where companies have talented women on their roster, but we don't have room for them. And I'm saying this to you right now as a fan of independent wrestling, the fact that you pride yourself on that, I commend you a lot.
Yeah, it's listen, I'm not going to sit here and say that I do the best job at it. I'm not a woman, right? So I get where a lot of people come from. They want women's voices who understand women's wrestling, who are deep in that and understand it on a very different level, to be in charge of it, to book it, to put the stories together. And that is something that I try my very best to do, is always sit with my talent, male, female, or otherwise, and say, hey, how do we best present this? Because I want to make sure that what we put out in that ring in front of those fans is presented in the best way possible. And it's always been something that I've wanted to do. And it's, whether it's Trish Adora or Janai Kai or Jordan Blade or Clara Carreras or Ruthless Lala or JC Storm or whoever it is, we want to make sure that we're highlighting them. We're not just checking a box. It was something that was very big for me when we were putting together the pre-show, to make sure that we had a women's match on the pre-show, because I was like, even though we have Clara Carreras in the 6-train scramble, and even though we have such a high quality women's match, a main event level match between Ruthless Lala and Mercedes Martinez, it still didn't. I still looked at my show and I was just like, I don't have enough women. Like, it still didn't sit right with me, right? I don't like to just book women to check the box. I think I'm very big on women's wrestling is wrestling, right? And I don't think women's wrestling only has to be served in one way, right? You can have women wrestling in intergender matches. You can have women wrestling against other women. You can have women that aren't always having to play the female in peril against the man, right? When I was able to put together Mercedes Martinez versus Darius Carter many, many years ago, you didn't see Mercedes Martinez sitting in there like, oh my God, I'm scared of big bad Darius Carter because he's a man. No, Mercedes Martinez went and put the fight to Darius Carter, because he didn't. And that's the thing. I feel like a lot of people, when they do book women's wrestling, they book intergender matches, it's always, let's put the little woman against the big bad man, right? And it's just like, you got to be more creative. Like, I think there's a lot of things that can be done. And I always try to ask people, right? Because again, I'm not a woman. I don't know the answers to certain questions. I can think, I can assume, and I can try to, come up with ideas. But at the end of the day, like, hey, does this make sense? Does this work? Does this present this in the best light? And if I'm told no, okay, let's figure something else out.
I completely agree with you. I have that as well. Obviously, I'm not a promoter, but there's times where, like, I'll have something presented to me and it's, about, women. And I sit there and go, well, let me ask some female friends I have, because the one thing I've been taught over this, because you keep bringing up the word assume. And the biggest thing I have been taught, and you're going to laugh at the reference to this, if you remember the old Odd Couple television show,
yep.
There was the line in the show, I don't remember which episode it was, that if you assume, you make an ass out of you and me.
Yep.
That's
why
right now.
saying in the book, yep.
That's why now I don't assume anything. I'll turn around and ask, and then they'll look at me and go, and they'll sit there and go, well, what do you think? And I'm like, I didn't want to assume. I didn't want to assume.
Right.
But another match that I know you're going to have on the card, and you actually brought his name up before, is Darius Carter. Darius Carter taking on what's his name? George.
Mr. Number One, the legend, George South.
So first of all, how did you pull getting him in, and him going up against? I've said it for a while. I think one of the biggest names on the independent scene in the Northeast, and the All-Father, Darius Carter.
So I've been, and this is 100% true, I have been trying to put together a match between George South and Darius Carter for about 5 years now. So this goes all the way back, and I actually just spoke with Mr. Anthony Cole a couple of days ago. We ran into each other at a show. And I told him, I said, I wanted to try to do this when I was at BCW. Like, this would have been really dope. And I was trying to, get the machination. So many people who know me know my dad lives in North Carolina. And I'm in North Carolina very regularly, just as much as I'm in New York. And so I have a lot of I got a lot of exposure to Carolina wrestling. I'm a huge old school NWA guy. Like, I grew up on the WWF, right? Mm-hmm. So, like, obviously being a kid born and raised in New York City, the WWF is what I watched. And then when I had cable, oh crap, WCW. This is really cool. And I started watching WCW. And I became a very big fan of the Four Horsemen. And that's when my grandfather, God rest his soul, said, oh, you don't even know how good those guys are. And I'm like, what do you mean? And that's when I got exposed to the world of the territories, of the NWA, of the AWA, of Florida Championship Wrestling, Georgia Championship Wrestling, Jim Crockett Promotions, all of that. And I fell in love with all of it. And George South is a man, wrestled in the Carolina territories and the Southern territories for a very, very long time, known as Mr. Number One. And, one of the biggest claims to fame is he is Ric Flair's favorite opponent. When Ric Flair would go around and do territory stuff, and he'd be coming into the area and he needed somebody to work, he would, hey, bring me George South. Bring in George South. And he's worked everybody. I mean, he's been in the ring with the Honky Tonk Man. He's been in there with the Ultimate Warrior, with the British Bulldogs, with the young Sean and Marty Jannetty, with Jimmy Snuka. He actually, God rest his soul, Owen Hart's first televised match in the WWF when he was originally under the mask of the Blue Blazer back in 1988. His first opponent on television, George South.
Oh, wow.
Great Muda's WCW debut. 1989 against who? George South. Right? George South was that guy, and he is still that man. He is a trainer down in North Carolina, trained the likes of Tessa Blanchard, Savannah Evans, Cedric Alexander, Darius Lockhart, who we recently saw in the NWA, among a bunch of other people who trace their training lineage back to George South. And he still wrestles at a very, very high level, primarily for his home promotion, AML Wrestling down in North Carolina. They primarily run in the Winston-Salem area of North Carolina. And when I was down in North Carolina and I became friends with people who wrestled for AML and PWX, who no longer operates out in North Carolina, and a couple of those territory promotions in North Carolina, and I started to meet a lot of these guys, and you've seen a lot of them on my shows. People like Savannah Evans, people like Yaya, the gifted one, people like Rayhan, who I met under his former gimmick. People like Billy Brash, who was with me when I was at BCW, who I brought into BCW. Guys like that, just to name a few, who came from that Southern territory. And I remember one day I was sitting down with some of them, and I said, you know, it would be a fantastic match, just for shits and giggles. Darius Carter versus George South. And everybody just stopped. Everybody just stopped, and everybody just looked at me, and they're like, oh, I'd pay to see that. That would be great. And at that moment, I just knew. I was like, somehow, some way, I got to figure out a way to make this match happen. And spoke to George and was trying to get in contact with people, and it was a little tough and couldn't make things work. And then obviously the pandemic happened, and then, you know, I split with BCW, and so, okay, now I don't have a promotion that I'm working at that can host the match. What do we do now? And then I started We Are Wrestling, and then I was just like, I love this match. I want to do this match. I want to do this match. I want to do this match so freaking bad. To quote Danny Moff, I was excited. It finally all came together. And I remember the day I called Darius Carter. And it took me about a half hour to get in contact with him because he had me on hold for about 25 minutes. And then Darius is the best hold because Darius will pick up the phone and be like, hey, give me 2 seconds. I'll put you on hold for 2 seconds. I'll be right with you. And then he puts you. And then you wait for like 5 minutes. Hey, I'm still busy. I get back to you. Click, click. And you're on hold for an hour after. But I finally got to him and I said, Darius, I think we're going to be able to make that match happen. He said, which match? And I said, George South. And he just stopped and he said, great, now I can retire him.
I could see him saying that.
George South is, and this is legit, this is a shoot. September 8th, We Are Wrestling presents Deja Vu, its second anniversary show. That is on Friday, September 8th, correct?
Yes.
On Thursday, September 7th, George South turned 61 years old.
Oh, jeez.
The day after his 61st birthday, he is coming to the Bronx to face the All-Father, Darius Carter.
Great birthday present to him.
Now, I do know that his friends over at AML, Brian Hawks, one of the heads of talent relations over there at AML, and Tracy Myers, one of the promoters over there at AML, I know that they have a birthday celebration scheduled for Mr. George South on Sunday, September 10th. I don't know if he's making it.
Oh, boy.
I don't know. I don't know if George South leaves New York. Now, this is me saying that, knowing full well that George South is a crazy old man, and I say that with all the respect in the world. The man has come to New York and wrestled Nick Gage. I saw him wrestle a death match against Nick Gage at WrestleCade in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. I've seen him wrestle a death match against Colby Carino in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And I said, what in the world is going on here? George South may be a crazy old man. And I said that with all the respect in the world to Mr. George South. But, and I won't reveal all of it, but as I heard Darius say about Mr. George South, and you'll be able to see this on our social media within the next 48 hours, George South has never stepped in the ring with someone as sadistic and as, to put it to you very simply, Darius Carter respects George South because of his legend and who he is and what he's done in his career. But just because he respects them does not mean that Darius Carter will have mercy on George South.
I'm not surprised by that at all. I saw Darius take on Danny Moff at Pro Wrestling Magic last summer. And I kid you not. Now, obviously, you've been in Ridgefield Park before. You know how many people usually are in that building. It sounded to me, sitting there when Moff won the title off of Carter, it sounded like there was 1,000 people in that room.
It is always a day to rejoice when someone beats Darius Carter, because for some reason, some way, shape, or form, Darius Carter always finds a way to win. By hook or by crook. So it's going to be very interesting, and it's very funny because here we are, September 8th. Darius Carter will finally get to face George South. I know not too long ago, over in Staten Island, I believe it was in Staten Island, it was in Brooklyn, one of the two. I forget where the show was. But for a company that Darius Carter is the champion of, Warriors of Wrestling, Darius Carter actually went one-on-one with what many would say is George South's most famous student, Tessa Blanchard. And from what I know, from eyewitness accounts, when Darius was fighting Tessa Blanchard in the ring, there was a point in the match where I think Darius hit her with something. I forget what it was. And he said to her, "Tell George exactly how this feels."
Oh, jeez. But it's funny, we're talking about Darius, and I've always said this with people like Darius Carter, because I feel like there's, when you look at pro wrestling, you have two types of heels. You have the cool heel, and you have the true heel. And I've said this for a while now, that Darius, to me, is that true heel. The second that music hits, I don't care which promotion he's in, you hear the boos right away.
And if you don't, by the time Darius is 5 minutes into a match, you're booing him.
Oh yeah, or his 5 minute walk down the ramp.
Right. I remember one time Darius said to me after a show, it wasn't a We Are Wrestling show, it was a show that I was at, just kind of helping out. And I remember telling Darius, I said he had come out for an interview earlier in the show. And there were a couple of fans in the front row during his interview that cheered him. And I remember Darius came to the back. I said, "Hey, you got some people in the front row that actually like you." He said, "What? Where?" Because he didn't notice it. And I pointed out the fans that had cheered him. When Darius went out for his match later that night, it was Darius's sole mission to make those fans that had cheered him earlier in the show hate him. And when I tell you, they were booing their heads off by the time the match was over. And Darius lost that match, I remember. And Darius went to the back with a big smile on his face. He said, "What the hell are you smiling about? You lost." He's like, "Yeah, but they're booing me."
But it's funny though, because like we, a lot of times on the show, we get into this whole discussion about the true heels.
Yeah.
And whenever we talk, and I don't even look at WWE or AEW, but I look more like the indie scene. Darius Carter is always on that list to me.
You know who was also a true heel? Ryan Peterson is damn true heel.
We'll get into Ryan in a second.
You do all the work, John. He makes you do all the work, and then he sits back and gets fat off the riches. Like, "Oh yeah, Around the Ropes podcast. That's me. Yeah. Oh, John, this is my co-host, John. John does all the work, Ryan."
We'll get into Ryan in a second, because I do have a question I always ask anybody who comes on who's worked with him, but we'll get to that in a second, because I want to get into the other two shows that you have, the other two big shows. I know you have a lot of stuff coming up in September, but you have two other big shows I want to get to. The next one I want to get to is actually Titan Championship Wrestling, September 16th.
Blaze of Glory.
Yes, Blaze of Glory. Obviously, we're coming off the show, the last. I feel like Titan, and believe me, no offense to Titan, I feel like they run a show every other 2 weeks, it seems like. But, I mean, looking at this card, obviously, you have a lot of big names on this card. Is there one match in particular you're looking forward to?
Oh, 100%. 100%. Listen, if I wasn't calling commentary for this show, as you said, there are a lot of great matches, but there's one. Oh, there's one that I kind of want to sit front row for it just to enjoy it. It is the match, or as I like to call it, the public viewing and funeral of one Andre Paulino.
Okay, yes.
As Andre Paulino will go one-on-one against the Thanos of the Northeast, the Don, the storyteller himself, TJ Marconi.
Yeah, I feel sorry for him.
I don't. Because, see, Andre likes to run his mouth. And Andre puts himself in some very perilous positions. And when I was growing up, I learned a very simple thing. Don't open your mouth unless you're willing to pay the price. And Andre is going to be paying a very, very steep price when he goes up against TJ Marconi, a man who won the Andre the Giant Battle Royal in North Carolina, in Ellerbe, North Carolina, the show that Titan Championship Wrestling did with the Rankin Museum as a tribute to Andre the Giant. He won that Battle Royal, which included men like Cyrus the Destroyer in that match, right? And TJ Marconi stood tall. And TJ has spoken a lot about how he feels he doesn't necessarily get the type of opponents that he probably should be getting at Titan. And then here we go. We got Andre Paulino. Okay. The bastard child of Drake and No Way Jose. And don't get me wrong. I don't want to be too much of a heel. I like Andre. I think he has a lot of talent. I think he's very good. But like I said, he runs his mouth. And he opens his mouth. And he's like, hey, Papi, what happened? What happened here? I don't know. I'm Dominican. Well, he is going to get a beat down so bad at the hands of TJ Marconi that he's going to be swimming back to DR.
I've learned one thing, and I agree with you about, you don't open your mouth. You don't open your mouth to somebody who can twist you and kill you like TJ Marconi probably could.
Yeah. If you can't win the fight, don't put yourself in the fight. But talking about guys that have opened their mouths and written checks that they can cash, I am very much looking forward to seeing how much further Anthony Gangone is going to go in his quest against Titan management. This man has been a fighting champion, an incredible fighting champion for Titan. And he has a gripe, and he has what he has said is 100% true. You've got guys like Anthony Gangone who have put Titan on their back, and yet time after time they get disrespected. They get they get overlooked, right? For what people always, I got this over here. I have a great champion. Oh, look at that. That's nice. No, pay attention to your champion. Right. Speaking of another champion who's getting mistreated at Titan Championship Wrestling, the only world champion in Titan Championship Wrestling, the world middleweight champion, the shining star, Ray Kalitri. This man took that middleweight championship and turned it into a world championship. And doesn't even get the respect when he makes his entrance at Titan Championship Wrestling to be announced as the world middleweight champion. He has defended that championship in Mexico. He has defended that championship in the Caribbean. He has defended that championship across in other countries, in the European nations, in African nations. He has done this. No one else has. Ray Kalitri has. And yet doesn't even get the respect of being called the world middleweight champion, whether it be by the ring announcer, whether it be by the backstage correspondent. They don't even have the decency, the respect to call him the world middleweight champion. And then, instead of celebrating the man that is your world middleweight champion, that travels the world, literally gets off of a red-eye flight to come back to Titan, defend the championship, to then get on a late-night private flight so that he can go back to another international booking and continue to carry that Titan World Middleweight Championship. Instead of getting the respect that he deserves, what happened? Triple threat match. Stack the odds against the World Middleweight Champion. You would think when you have a champion the caliber of a Ray Kalitri, when you have a champion the caliber of an Anthony Gangone, you would be going out and you would be finding them the best competition, and you would be putting them in the ring in singles competition in main event matches. But no, we continue to put. We had Anthony Gangone defended the Titan World Heavyweight Champion, the Titan Heavyweight Championship in a triple threat match in North Carolina. Had a 33% chance if you're going just off straight math. Could have lost his title without even being pinned. How's that fair to Gangone?
It's not.
How's that showing respect to your heavyweight champion who has carried your brand for over a year? The last time that we saw Ray Kalitri had to defend his championship again in triple threat action, and now at Blaze of Glory has to defend his championship once again in triple threat action. How is that showing? It's not. And the man has made your championship a world championship.
And I'll even go as far as saying this. I think Ray, we were talking before about Darius Carter being one of the big names in the independent scene. I think you got to put Ray Kalitri in it.
Oh, 100%.
And I remember going back to the last Titan show I was at down in Toms River. And I know he was supposed to be on the card. And then I think last minute got pulled off because, he had something go on. And they ended up having Azrael take on Merck.
Yeah, it was supposed to be a triple threat match. Again, Azrael, Merck, and let's talk about Merck for a moment, right? Let's talk about this for a second. Let's talk about this really quickly. So, Ken Powers, let's go all the way back. Okay, Ken Powers against the Patriot. 1-on-1 for the vacant Mob Phi American Television Championship, right? Clipper Jones and TKO Kosenko come out to ringside to support their friend, their stablemate in Genesis, Ken Powers. He wins the Mob Phi American Television Championship. And what does Titan Management do? They say, hey, we don't know these two guys, Clipper Jones and TKO Kosenko, and they shouldn't be here. So you know what we're going to do? We're going to put them in the ring, and we're going to teach them a lesson, and we're going to have Monster Mac and Joker teach these two kids a lesson. But Merck running around in a goddamn mask, running around, no one knowing who it is, attacking Ray Kalitri after he defends the World Middleweight Championship, okay, trying to attack AJ Pan, okay, and Titan lets that go. How does this man get access to the building? Why is this man running out to the ring and security's not trying to stop him? Why is, General Manager S.P. Anderson, Principal Owner Billy Fetsky, why are they not doing anything to stop this man? Maybe they're in cahoots with him. But they have a problem with TKO Kosenko and Clipper Jones coming out to celebrate with their friend and give emotional support to their friend fighting for the Mob Phi American Television Championship. They get in trouble. But Merck, month after month after month, ran out. No security stopped him. Nobody came out to aid Ray Kalitri. Nothing. This man came out in a mask. No one knew who it was. And he attacked Ray Kalitri. And then all of a sudden, he gets a shot at the World Middleweight Championship? What? And then, not only does he get a shot at the World Middleweight Championship, but then at the very next show, the one you're talking about in Tom's River, he gets another shot in triple threat action? You know, the double standards, the disrespect, it makes no sense.
No, I completely agree with what you're saying. I mean, yes, I agree with what you're saying on it. I think it's completely disrespectful. I don't think it's fair, how Titan treats some of their champions. And I completely agree. The biggest thing I remember, first of all, I held some of the titles towards the second half of the show. Those titles weigh a lot.
They do. They do.
But the bigger moment for me, and I know it's going to be a little bit of a markout moment here for a second, was when I got asked to go into the ring. And I said this on the show before. Getting into the ring was fine. Especially I had to go through the middle rope, and I'm not the tallest person, so going through the middle rope made things look a little interesting. Coming out of the ring, that was a totally different story.
And before we move on to Invictus,
yeah,
it's, I don't want to sit here and say, listen, I think Titan has had some great champions. There's been 3 heavyweight champions in our lineage: Monster Mac, Johnny Moran, Anthony Gango. Johnny Moran carried the brand for Titan and had the Titan management turn their back on Moran. Gangone carried the flag for Titan Championship Wrestling. Titan management turned their back on Anthony Gango. Ray Kalitri single-handedly revived and revitalized the middleweight division, made that championship world championship. Titan Championship Wrestling continues to turn their back on Ray Kalitri. And for me, I just want Titan Championship management to really look at its champions and say, man, we have a great roster of champions. You have an incredible heavyweight champion in Anthony Gangone. You have an incredible world middleweight champion in Ray Kalitri. You have incredible tag team champions and a former heavyweight champion in Johnny Moran and Aaron Roxas. You now have Daniel Alexander as the lightweight champion. An incredible talent as well, taking the title from another man who's incredible talent, Rocket. Right? You have incredible champions. And now you have Ken Powers. Let me not forget about Ken Powers, the Mob Fight American television champion. Right? You have talent holding these championships who deserve your support, who deserve to be put up on that pedestal and be given the main event spots, be given the main event matches, and be given the best, because they're going to push Titan to another level. And when you see the way that Anthony Gangone is treated, when you see the way Ken Powers is treated, when you see the way Ray Kalitri is treated, the favoritism, it's blatant. And we got to get rid of it. I really think the cream rises to the top. And if you let everybody just go and you get the favoritism out, the nepotism out, and you just let it happen, there'll be some great things at Titan. And I want to be there on the commentary table to call all of it. But I'm also going to tell the truth. And I will call it like I see it.
And that's what we always talk about on this podcast. Me and your favorite person in the world, Ryan Peterson.
Yeah.
No, but that's what we talk about is we sit there and we don't have an alignment to any promotion. But we will sit there and obviously, damn well Ryan has the experience. He's been doing it for, it feels like an eternity. I haven't been doing it as long as Ryan, but I have 2 working eyes. I watch wrestling basically every day of the week. And the one thing with us is we always tell it as is. So I appreciate you, saying
in fact,
through honesty.
I just got a text right now from Ray Kalitri. He is currently, right now, even on a federal United States holiday weekend, he is texting me right now, internationally. He has a match scheduled for tomorrow for Labor Day on an American holiday, defending the championship internationally.
Wow. That's quite impressive. That's quite impressive. But talking about the last show that you have coming up this month, Invictus, 3-year anniversary show.
Yes.
Again, back at the same place that you'll be this Friday for We Are Wrestling. Hopefully, hopefully it's still standing.
Yeah.
First of all, how do you feel about Invictus making it to 3 years? And is there a match of the matches announced that you're looking forward to being on commentary for?
There's a lot of matches that night that I'm really looking forward to being on commentary for, especially just that really bad blood matchup between Jay Bougie and PJ Savage. But definitely really that triple threat match that was recently just announced for the Invictus Grand Championship, Ken Broadway versus Landon Hale versus Nikolai White. The last time that Invictus was at St. Helena's in the Bronx, Nikolai White faced Ken Broadway one-on-one for that championship and came within inches of winning that title. And, I'm not going to say while I don't agree with the way that Nikolai White went about trying to win the championship, I understand the route that he took. And I spoke to Ken Broadway after the match, and he actually said, you know what? I don't hate it, because I'd have probably done the same damn thing. So there's a level of respect there. So Nikolai is taking Ken Broadway to the limit. Man, if you were at the Bronx Brewery to see Landon Hale one-on-one against Ken Broadway, oh my God. There were multiple times in that match where I thought Ken Broadway was not going to walk out Invictus Grand Champion. I legitimately thought on multiple moments in that match, holy shit, Landon Hale is going to shock the world, and Landon Hale is going to win the Invictus Grand Championship. And now, again, just going by the straight math of it, Ken Broadway is at a disadvantage. He has a straight-up 33% chance of retaining that championship and doesn't even have to be pinned to lose the title, right? Yep. Landon Hale could pin Nikolai White. Nikolai White could pin Landon Hale, right? And either way, walk out the grand champion. So the odds are stacked against Ken Broadway, but if there's one thing I know about Ken Broadway is he likes it when his back is against the wall. He likes it when he has to fight from below and fight from underneath and really prove everyone wrong. There are a lot of people, I've known Ken Broadway for a very, very long time. And Ken Broadway has always said there's been a lot of people who have always counted me out. And there's been nothing that has been more proud for me than to shut each and every one of them up and prove each and every one of them wrong. I also know that there is a sentimentality to this grand championship. When he won this grand championship, he told a lot of people, this one's for Maddie. For those of you who know the history, when we lost Matt Travis, may God, may his soul rest in peace. May God, watch over him always. When we lost Matt Travis, it broke Ken Broadway at a very deep level. It hurt a lot of us who knew Matt Travis for a very, very long time. But Broadway and Travis they had a very special bond, a very deep bond. And when he won that, when he was in the Grand Championship tournament in the Bronx, he said, if I win this, this is for Matt. And when he won that championship, he dedicated that win, he dedicated that title, he dedicated his title reign to Matt Travis. And I know being in the Bronx, being back in Matty's home, Ken is going to be fighting extra hard to keep that championship around his waist, because I highly doubt Ken Broadway wants to ever lose that championship, but I highly doubt he wants to lose it in the Bronx, in a place where he knows Matty is looking over him stronger than anywhere. But 3 years for Invictus is absolutely incredible. I got to Invictus. So for about the first year, I think year and a half almost of Invictus, I was not yet with Invictus. I got to be with Invictus near the end of Leroy's year-long title run. So I think it was about right after their first year anniversary, that I joined up with Invictus, and it has been an incredible ride to see how Invictus has grown, what Invictus has been able to do, and they're only getting better. I am very proud to be able to call Alex Aceta and Nick Goutman and their team friends and family. So glad to be able to work with them, not only commentary wise, but also just being backstage and being privy to a lot of the conversations. And when I tell you that, Invictus, similar to like We Are Wrestling, there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes that are just trying to take it to the next level. And, it's going to be an incredible ride. And I can't wait for a 3-year anniversary. I mean, in independent wrestling in New York, come on now. That's a long time.
I very much agree. Since you've been with Invictus, has actually brought up an interesting question. You've been on commentary, for a lot of their shows.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of putting you on the spot right now. Is there one match for you in your time with Invictus that stands out?
Oh man, there are a couple, and I'm just spitballing off the top of my head. Landon Hale versus Nikolai White in Ridgefield Park was an absolute clinic, an absolute banger. One of my top 3 matches at Invictus. I would also say the match between Big Trouble Ben Bishop and PJ Savage, an absolute incredible freaking matchup. And I would say, quite honestly, and I don't want, I'm going to say something after this. I will honestly say Robert Martyr versus Travis Huckabee in a Pure Rules match in Ridgefield Park. Those 3 were some of my 3 favorite matches at Invictus. Now, not to be left out, at the very last Invictus show, Jay Bougie defended that social media championship against Flip Gordon in an absolute banger. Only reason I didn't mention that match, I didn't want recency bias to take effect. But there have been a lot of incredible matches at Invictus. I'm not going to sit here and say that. I mean, if we talk about matches just under the Invictus banner as well, TakeOver versus Shane Taylor Promotions, which Invictus had a hand in putting together, absolutely incredible. The Climb for the Clout ladder match, the second one in Ridgefield Park that PJ Savage won, was an absolute banger. And that's what's so great about Invictus. In 3 years, I can go down the list and listen, I'm even forgetting Gabe Sky versus Ichiban, right? Like, as I'm thinking about it, there's just more matches popping into my head. And that's what's been so great about Invictus, is that they've just given us great match after great match. And I am absolutely honored to be sitting at that commentary table calling those matches. And you got really lucky. I remember telling Alex, I felt like it was a little bit of divine intervention. I originally was not going to be available to call their show at the Bronx Brewery due to the fact that it was the same night as the Metallica concert in East Rutherford. And then the weather situation ended up pushing that show back, and I was able to make it. And I was so happy. And I really was, because that night was absolutely incredible. And at In Bloom 3, I should say, the 3rd anniversary of Invictus Wrestling in the Bronx, it's going to be one incredible. And think about this for a minute, John. You have We Are Wrestling's 2nd anniversary, beginning of the month. You have the end of that month. We are beginning with We Are Wrestling's 2nd anniversary, and we are ending with Invictus's 3rd anniversary.
It's incredible. I think a match for me, I've been to, a few Invictus shows. I think the biggest match for me that stands out, you have to go back to the 2nd anniversary show.
Okay.
I call it the Bloodbath on Bergen Avenue match. Please tell me. Please tell me you know which match I'm referring to.
I do. I want you to say, but I know exactly. I remember being on the call for that match.
Where you saw the team of Takeover take on, I think it's the Goon Squad, I think it is.
The Goons, yeah.
Goons, yeah. And the biggest thing I remember, because I remember Nick had posted the video of it on TikTok, actually, was when they made that turn to come outside. And all you just see is I'm standing out there talking to Dominic De Niro, actually, currently one half of your tag team champions. And all I see is I happen to look up and I see a garbage can go flying. And I'm like, oh boy, shit's about to hit.
Sounds about right. Listen, Jay Bougie and PJ Savage may not be on the best of terms right now. They may not be the best of friends right now. But if there's one thing we cannot deny, it's when those two men are on the same page and you add in Face and you add in Jacko, that foursome is absolutely incredible and violent.
Oh, yeah. Not a team you want to piss off.
No, not at all.
And I called the bloodbath on Bergen Avenue because there was at one point when they were outside, I don't remember who it was, ended up Irish whipping Face into literally the metal pole that stands outside of the Knights of Columbus.
Yeah, sounds about right.
And so that's why I've coined it as the bloodbath on Bergen Avenue. I mean, I also hear Invictus has a decent ring announcer. I can't.
Only if you've got time for one more match.
Well, speaking about the ring announcer, I ask this to every person who's ever worked with Ryan, and I'm not trying to,
I hate him.
But do you have a funny story working with Ryan?
Oh man, me and Ryan go way back. So I'm going to take this way back, way back. Ryan and I first met in Brooklyn, New York, when Ryan Peterson, then known as the Man-Child, a young, virile Ryan Peterson, was the ring announcer for Five Borough Wrestling, run by Troy Thompson, down in Brooklyn, New York. And I eventually became the lead commentator over there at Five Borough, and Ryan Peterson was our ring announcer, and him and I became very close, good friends, and have traveled the roads and been to a lot of similar places together. And it's been great to see Ryan kind of grow and really get a lot of opportunities in this business. He's great at what he does. I clown him because he's my boy and I love him. But when I think back to the things that Ryan Peterson and I were watching, right? Ryan Peterson being able to ring announce Kenny Omega in Brooklyn, calling matches for the current AEW World Heavyweight Champion Maxwell Jacob Friedman. A lot of the guys that you're seeing on TV right now, Ryan and I, we're coming up with, right? MJF, the Iron Savages, Bronson and Boulder. The current TBS champion, Chris Statlander. The Dark Order. The Silver and Reynolds. I mean, I was able to sit on commentary, and he was able to be in the ring and ring announce, and then come sit by me, and we would just laugh, and we would have these great memories, seeing all this stuff. And when we look back, when I look back on that, when I look back at those days with Five Borough Wrestling, and I look at Ryan Peterson, and I look at myself, and I look at where Mittens has gone, and what Mittens has become in our business. When I look at one half of the Invictus Tag Team Champions, Chris Barton, who I first met as a fan at Five Borough Wrestling. When I look at Pete Corvus, who I know personally, and I met as a fan at Five Borough Wrestling. When I look at a young man like Benjamin Falbo, who is now writing and doing creative for Catalyst Wrestling in Brooklyn, who we first met as a fan at Five Borough Wrestling. When I'm looking at all these people and I'm looking at where we all started, and we all started together. We were all doing this, really trying to find our way together. Chris Barton, like, oh man, I want to wrestle. I'm going to train. I'm going to find a place to go do this. Mittens, the biggest fan in independent wrestling in New York City. Ryan Peterson trying to find his way as a ring announcer. Me trying to find my way as a commentator. Benjamin Falbo, looking to get into writing and looking to get into creative. When you look, Pete saying, man, I want to wrestle. I want to do this. I want to do that. Those to me are the memories that I hold, because I remember where it all started. And if it wasn't for companies like Five Borough Wrestling, looking at us and not just seeing us as these kids who were just like, annoying, or everybody's, oh, these freaking marks. No, we wanted this. And yeah, we weren't, some of us weren't the guys that were going to be in the ring, getting our ass beat or kicking ass. But, Ryan, myself, Benjamin Falbo, Mittens, a lot of us, we had great talents that we had a love for this. And every time I get to work with Ryan, it's always fun. I will never let him forget that he is and will always be the man child. And yes, Ryan, we will always, always, always have time for one more match.
It's funny. I'll leave it on this. I bust his chops but he also busts my chops. That's just the type of friendship we have. And he's not even here right now, so when he watches this, when this goes up on YouTube, which, by the way, folks, please hit the subscribe button on our YouTube page. It costs you nothing, does wonders for us. I've always said this with Ryan. Ryan is one of those guys who he has a great mind for this industry. He has a great mind for this industry, and a lot of times we'll be talking on the show, and he'll come up with an idea, and I'll sit there and go, it actually may have some legs on it.
Oh, yeah.
And we joked. Well, not joke, but I'll give you a great example quickly. We just did a special on Bray Wyatt, literally the night he passed. And he was talking about how SmackDown should open up with the rocking chair on the top.
I said the same, yep.
And we were just saying it, just because, we were figuring, okay, let's go with it. Lo and behold, next night on SmackDown, they had the rocking chair. So I just sit there and I'm like, but I also say that this show does not get to where it's gotten to without him. Without him giving us sort of that check mark of saying, okay, these guys are credible. So I commend, as much as I bust his chops, and as much as I sit there and say, there wouldn't be Around the Ropes podcast without me. No, there wouldn't be Around the Ropes podcast where we are now without what Ryan Peterson has done.
All right. Let's stop being so nice to Ryan. It feels weird. It feels weird. But no, Ryan's a great dude. I mean, I absolutely love Ryan. I know he has a passion for this, and I really want to see Ryan make it one day. I hope to see Ryan one day on television, ring announcing somebody and then getting his ass beat.
I'm just going to say this. If that happens and you happen to be in the crowd, why do I have this feeling because you have such a loud mouth, all of a sudden, Ryan will get introduced and you'll just hear the one person all the way up and you won't see it on camera, but you'll just hear them. And he goes, "Yay, the man child.
Beat his ass." No, listen, you want to know, Ryan Peterson, I would pay for Ryan Peterson to ring announce every show that features Demetrius Papadon, because I just want Ryan to get told, open the damn rope for me. You hold the rope for me. I love it.
Oh, yeah.
I love when Ryan gets put in his place. But then again, this is also, I say that, and there's also a picture somewhere on the internet where Ryan Peterson is bursting out laughing that one time that I got Yakuza kicked by Darius Carter while sitting at the commentary table. So this is what I think of you, Ryan.
But Pete, this was fantastic. I'm glad we were able to finally have you on.
Yes.
And the door is open for you whenever you like to come back on.
Listen, ATR, we need you guys at We Are Wrestling. So we're going to make this happen. We're going to figure it out to have the Around the Ropes podcast at We Are Wrestling.
Oh, it's going to happen. Trust me. It's
There
definitely
we go.
It's definitely going to happen. Before we let you go, though, if you want to plug the tickets for all the shows that we just mentioned, go right ahead. And also, where can people find you and everything else on social media?
Yeah, so you can find me at primarily, it's not about me. It's all about We Are Wrestling. You can follow We Are Wrestling on Facebook. There are 2 current pages right now for We Are Wrestling because, unfortunately, my old Facebook, which is attached to the old company page, got hacked back in 2022. So please follow the one that has the current Deja Vu event logo on it on Facebook. You can find us on Instagram at We Are Wrestling 1, and you can find us on Twitter at wrestling_we. You can find me at Pete Rosado 87 on Twitter or as Pete Rosado on Facebook. I do not currently have an Instagram. For tickets this Friday night, you can get them on Eventbrite. Look up We Are Wrestling on Eventbrite. It'll take you directly to the page, or just come to the Bronx, 1315 Olmsted Avenue, St. Helena's Church in the Bronx. Mass transit available 2 blocks away. You also have a large parking lot. You can drive to the show and park in the parking lot for free. Tickets will also be on sale the night of at the door as well. Come out. You'll see Ruthless Lala versus Mercedes Martinez. Rob Killjoy defending the We Are Wrestling Grand Championship for the first time at home. He defended it on the road, not at home, against MLW star Ichiban. And so much more, including that huge tag team war between O'Shea Edwards and John Davis going up against Senta Slaughter, Dan Moff, and Sean Donovan. Top of that, you can go down to South Jersey on September 16th for Blaze of Glory Titan Championship Wrestling. Get tickets for that as well. And if you go on to Eventbrite, look up Invictus Championship Wrestling. You will find Invictus's 3rd year anniversary show, September 29th in the Bronx. Get your ticket. And I'll tell you this much. I'll tell you this. If you buy a ticket to We Are Wrestling's Deja Vu, and you buy a ticket to either Invictus or Titan, I will give you money back at the door for Deja Vu. So if you show up at Deja Vu for We Are Wrestling, and you say, hey, I saw your interview with Around the Ropes podcast, and I bought a ticket for tonight, and I bought a ticket for Invictus, or I bought a ticket for tonight, and I bought a ticket for Titan, I will personally give you money back as a discount on your ticket for supporting either Titan Championship Wrestling or Invictus Championship Wrestling, as well as We Are Wrestling. Or better yet, I will give you a discount on the next We Are Wrestling show coming up after this one. Either way, we'll figure it out. But if you support Titan or Invictus and you buy a ticket for either one of them after hearing this interview, as well as buying a ticket for us, you see me personally on September the 8th, and I will put money back in your pocket.
So, guys, all that information will be in the description box below. Again, guys, catch Pete basically everywhere in New York and New Jersey. In the next month or so, he's going to be a busy person. I also don't think he'll mind if you get him a cup of coffee just to keep him awake.
Please. Light and sweet. Milk and sugar.
Well, actually, we do have our own coffee Around the Ropes podcast.
There you go. There you go. Bring me some of that.
Well, I was going to say, I'll talk to Mr. Peterson about bringing you a bag at Invictus.
There you go. Listen, I'm with it. I'm for it. I'll brew it in the house.
But Pete, thank you so much for hopping on. It was a blast talking to you. Guys, for Pete Rosado, I'm John. This has been Around the Ropes, YouTube exclusive. We'll catch you guys on the next one.